So the ring 4 card Benavidez vs Yarde has just concluded, and overall it was quite an entertaining event. Sam Noakes and Abdullah Mason put on a really good account of themselves. Abdullah Mason did show some defensive flaws, but at the same time he's 21 years old. Boxers at that age don't typically take fights as difficult as Sam Noakes. There's several things Mason and his team can look at and work on in the future. As for Sam Noakes, he proved himself to be a world level fighter. He fought really well in there, looked strong, crafty, dangerous, and I do want to see him on the world stage again. I'd like to see Mason take on a guy like Denis Berinchik or Lucas Baddy, whereas Noakes can take a step back down to British level and face Maxi Hughes or Josh Padley. The most impressive performance of the night was Jesse Bam Rodriguez versus Fernando Puma Martinez. Bam was up against a serious opponent, a unified champion, undefeated, knockout puncher, wins over elite names like Joanan Carhas and Kazuto Ioka, and Bam just completely toyed with him start to finish. There was not a second of that fight where Bam didn't look in control. It was as if it was a sparring session and Bam was clearly about 5 or 6 years more experienced than the other guy. Bam won every single round and got the knockout in round 10. People are now calling for the Inoue and Junto Nakatani fights, but with Undisputed being so close, Kenshiro Teraji is set to face Wilbaldo Garcia for the IBF world title. Wait for the winner of that fight, which is most likely Kenshiro Teraji, then fight him for Undisputed, then move up to 118. Bam has just been stacking A-tier opponents on his resume. Now for the most intriguing outcome of the night, Devin Haney beats Brian Norman Jr. by decision. Now I was initially on Devin Haney to win this fight, up until about the week of the fight. I just didn't trust Haney to make the necessary adjustments at this stage, but as it turned out he did, even if it was just for a moment in the second round. Haney did plant his feet and counter, putting Norman down badly, and Haney also did a really good job of keeping the right glove up to block the left hook. But it was a bit disappointing after round 2 to see Haney not stand his ground again after the second round. Round 3 onwards was vintage Devin Haney. About 5 punches landed per round and about 20 clinches. Norman wasn't very effective at closing distance, so the clinches basically happened by themselves. This was a winnable fight for Norman in my opinion, because of some of the rounds that Haney won, he won based on 1 or 2 punches. If he was a bit more effective and consistent with his work rather than charging in and exploding, he could have maybe got the edge on the scorecards, but nevertheless, Haney did win clearly, I think. I think this one win does put Haney at number 1 at 147. Conor Benn seems to be the money fight, but there are 3 very beatable champions in the same division. As for Norman, it's back to the drawing board. I think he's still very good. It's just a bad style matchup versus Haney. I think he can come back and beat a guy like Raul Curiel or Amansas Stanionis. And finally, let's talk about David Benavidez versus Anthony Yarde. It was a crushing performance from Benavidez, similar to his form back at 168 that we haven't seen in a while. This is the best anyone's beaten Anthony Yarde, by the way. Kovalev was in serious danger of being knocked out in round 8. Beterbiev got hurt a couple times and Yarde won about 2 or 3 rounds. I only gave Yarde round 2. There wasn't really a moment past round 3 where you thought Yarde was even in the fight. The beating just became worse and worse. Yarde was playing counterpuncher, but found himself on the ropes in the process, and I thought Benavidez' defense looks really good tonight. I never really got the sense that Yarde could just land that one punch. David did a really good job of taking those shots on the gloves and coming back with 8-10 punch combinations. But now the question is, and the point of the video is, who does David Benavidez fight next? So as I always do, I've gathered a list of boxers from 168 to cruiserweight who I think could maybe possibly face Benavidez next, and I'm going to rank them based on the chances of winning. Like the video because our first pick is going to be his most likely next opponent, Zurdo Ramirez. Now we expected a call out of Bivol or Beterbiev, but instead, after the fight, he says he's going to fight Zurdo at cruiserweight. It is a shame that he's ditching the light heavyweight division already, it seems. I don't think he's even big for the division, I think he just struggles to make weight because he's undisciplined. But you can't really take credit away from Benavidez for facing Zurdo Ramirez. As much as he may be a lesser opponent to Bivol or Beterbiev, he's still a 2-division unified champion. The light heavyweight to cruiserweight jump is very big, and Zurdo is a very capable boxer. I think he's also developed defensively after moving up to cruiserweight. With that being said, I think he's only got a decent chance of beating Benavidez. Now, I've been vocal on my opinions on Zurdo Ramirez for a while. Zurdo is horrifically slow for a guy who's at the elite level in boxing. In the first few rounds especially, he's ridiculously easy to push back. I don't think Benavidez being that much of a lighter man is that much of a difference. Lighter man skill is a real thing. Benavidez doesn't entirely rely on his size. He's very technically good at what he does. His work on the ropes is maybe the best in boxing. And I think Zurdo will just naturally find himself on the ropes. He's very easy to hit to the body. And I think Benavidez would overall outwork him to a decision, 117-111 type fight. Zurdo does typically find his flow in the second half, but I think he's going to be too slow and too inactive in certain rounds to win them. And that's going to take us to a fight that should have happened a long time ago. Canelo Alvarez, who's going in low chance. Now, once upon a time, I would have taken Canelo to win this fight back in 2021 when he fought Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant. That was prime Canelo. Benavidez himself also wasn't quite as convincing at that time. But over time, the gap has closed and now widened in Benavidez's favour. Around 2023, when Benavidez beat Caleb Plant and Dmitry Yarde, I think it would have been a 50-50 fight. But as we've seen Canelo's gas tank get worse and worse, and now that Benavidez has filled out for 175, the only way this fight would happen is if it was at 175, in which case Canelo would have such a disadvantage in cardio. I also simply don't think he's got the fight in him like he used to do. It felt like he just sort of accepted defeat versus Crawford. We've not seen Canelo have any sense of urgency for a long time. And to beat Benavidez, you have to be willing to go through hell to win the fight. I don't think Canelo wants to go through hell, that's why he ducks him in the first place, and that's why he's in low chance, which is going to take us back down even further to Joshua Buatsi. Joshua Buatsi, especially recently, has been a proper waste of potential. He showed so much promise as an amateur, beating guys like Alexander Kizniak, being the perfect blend of boxer-puncher. He was sharp, aggressive and spiteful, but over time as a professional, it's like over the years he's become more and more gun-shy. It started around 2019 when he faced Ryan Ford. He got injured in that fight, and as a result he's been more and more conservative as his fights have gone on, ultimately resulting in the loss to Callum Smith. And I think worst of all, the Zach Parker performance. Zach Parker is not a difficult guy to break if you just press him a bit too much. Buatsi fought like it was a sparring session, didn't seem to give one the entire fight, and I think should have lost in the process. And I think most importantly, in relevance to the Benavidez fight, I don't think he can fight going backwards, which he will need to. His chance to beat Benavidez is quite literally a lucky punch. Speaking of Callum Smith, we also have Callum Smith in the low chance tier. Now, originally I wanted to put Callum Smith in the decent chance tier because I think he's good. I do like Callum Smith. He's powerful, he's sharp, he's technical, and I think he will beat David Morrell if they were to fight. That being said, what has caused Callum Smith's worst three performances? John Ryder, Canelo Alvarez, and Artur Beterbiev, what do they have in common? They're all pressure fighters, and as a result, Callum Smith became very gun-shy in their fights. He did just deal with pressure quite well versus Joshua Buatsi, but like I've explained before, Buatsi seriously lacks a sense of urgency, and that was a very competitive fight. You can argue Benavidez has the most crushing pressure in boxing. When he starts unloading on the ropes, it's almost impossible to get him off you. This is the exact type of fight that Callum Smith would shit himself in, which is why he's all the way down in low chance. Which is going to take us way back up to close fight where we have Artur Beterbiev. Now, a couple of years ago, Beterbiev would have been in the Will Wins here, but I think for the first time we really saw Beterbiev's age show in the Bivol rematch in the second half of the fight. Beterbiev is usually known for being strongest in the second half of fights, so to see him lose steam in the second half versus Bivol was quite concerning, and I think it'd be impossible to expect an improvement from that because Beterbiev is only going to get older, he's only getting more injured. I think Benavidez will have a really tough time in the first half versus Beterbiev. Beterbiev is a deceptively good counterpuncher. You never see someone stand on the front foot versus Beterbiev and last. So it would be interesting to see if Benavidez's defense can hold up. But if Benavidez can force Beterbiev to work a pace he's not used to, and he can't be pulled around, Benavidez does have much faster hands. He may be simply too fast for Beterbiev in his old age in the pocket. But then again, Beterbiev is much more powerful and he is a very good counterpuncher. So it is a difficult one to call. I do think Beterbiev is a better technical boxer than Benavidez is, but time is the only undefeated opponent, and that may be too much for Beterbiev, which is going to take us all the way down to the low chance tier where we're going to talk about Terence Crawford. Now, if we imagine Terence Crawford and David Benavidez in the same natural weight class, it doesn't get better stylistically for Crawford than Benavidez. But I do think this is a fight where the size difference is so ridiculous that I don't think it's that winnable. The Canelo win for Crawford was incredibly impressive, but at the end of the day, Canelo's career did start at 147. He's an actually smaller, shorter guy who's bulked up over time. David Benavidez is an actual light heavyweight size, frame, weight and height-wise. Not only that, he pushes much more of a pace than Canelo does. If Crawford isn't powerful enough to hurt Benavidez, there is nothing stopping David from unloading combinations on Crawford against the ropes. Benavidez's style works best against people smaller than him. It would take an inhumane effort from Crawford to win the fight, basically. The only reason I've given Crawford this 10% is because generally he is a lot better than Benavidez, and the styles do favour him being a counterpuncher. But that's about it. I think size will matter at a certain point. And that's going to take us further down to the no tier where we have Ben Whittaker. Now, I'm not someone who completely shits on Ben Whittaker. I think he's very good, very talented, very athletic. He does funny dances and such. But we keep seeing holes in his defence that haven't really been fixed yet. We did see the first Liam Cameron fight. Obviously, he got the knockout in the second fight, but there is a question of how that fight could have gone if it went another 7 or 8 rounds. Keeping in mind, Ben Whittaker is 28 years old. He's not at the age where you start making rapid improvements. I think if at any stage of your career you're finding Liam Cameron's pressure to be too much, there's no way you can beat David Benavidez. And that's why he's in the no tier. And that's going to take us a bit further up to the low chance tier where we have Imam Hatayev. Hatayev, or Katayev, however you say it, looked really good versus David Morrell in their fight. He really surprised me. Katayev is stupidly powerful, deceptively technical, and he's also quite fast, but there is something to be said in the performance before he faced Morrell, which is why I was so confident in Morrell to win that fight in the first place. Katayev fought a durable Argentinian by the name of Derval Elias Palacio. Palacio took the centre and made the effort to be the aggressor in that fight, and because Katayev is not used to fighting on the back foot, he was really struggling to maintain the pace. And I was thinking watching this live, if Palacio maintains this pace, Katayev will be stopped. Thankfully, Palacio did also run out of steam, but one thing that David Benavidez will not do is run out of steam versus Katayev. Naturally, the fight will be dangerous early on because of how dangerous Katayev is, but beyond the 6th round, Benavidez would likely stop Katayev. He's too muscle-bound to really maintain that level of cardio. Now moving on back down to the no tier where we have Jake Paul. I've got no reason at all to put Jake Paul in this video realistically. I just thought it would be funny. Moving on back up to the cruiserweight division, we have Noel Mikhailian. And I'm going to put Mikhailian in the 50-50 tier. This is a sneaky difficult fight for Benavidez. I personally rate Mikhailian more than I rate Zurdo. Zurdo is a very out-of-shape cruiserweight. Mikhailian is a straight-up cruiserweight, very built for the division. And just a generally very well-schooled, very well-rounded boxer. I thought he should have beaten Badu Jack back in May. And also because the light heavyweight to cruiserweight jump is quite vast. I think we will see Benavidez struggle to mount his pressure versus a guy who stands his ground and is physically bigger than him. Mikhailian fits that criteria and he can punch as well. And for that reason, I don't see it being a fight that Benavidez will ever take. And that's going to take us to the king of the cruiserweights, Jai Opetaia. Now, originally, I wanted to put Opetaia in the will win tier. I just thought surviving the first 6 rounds versus Opetaia would be an impossible task. But watching Benavidez' defense versus Yarde, he's not likely to open himself up in the first 6 rounds. There is a question of whether Benavidez will actually fill out for the cruiserweight division. I think if he does fail and he's drastically outsized, outweighed, outstrengthed, Opetaia will essentially have his way with him if his punches are too effective. But that's assuming that Opetaia can keep pushing Benavidez backwards or knock him out for the first 6 rounds or the entire distance. If we see a situation where Benavidez is simply eating these body shots and he's willing to keep trucking forwards and taking these shots on the gloves and to the guts, all Benavidez really has to do is weather that storm and he's good. A gassed out Opetaia in the second half will be in trouble versus Benavidez. While Benavidez may be more of a natural cruiserweight compared to Benavidez, he doesn't take advantage of a slowing opponent the same way Benavidez does. And if Jai becomes just as gassed as he was versus Benavidez in the rematch, I think he may get stopped by Benavidez. But that is assuming that Benavidez is filled out enough for the division, he can take a punch, and he survives the first 6 rounds. In any other case, Opetaia would win, it'd be too dangerous. And that's going to take us to the fight that ideally should be happening next, Dmitry Bivol. I'm going to put Bivol in the close fight tier. This is hands down, no question, the best fight to make in the light heavyweight division, and if it never happens, that will just be a giant shame. Originally, I was quite confident in Bivol to beat Beterbiev, but one thing I do notice from watching Bivol is that he doesn't really stand his ground and counter. He's got excellent footwork, an excellent jab, maybe the best guard in boxing history, if not second to Winky Wright. But on the other hand, if Bivol is just blocking punches, and even if they're not doing any damage, if he's just blocking them and doing nothing else, Benavidez will be more than happy to simply win those rounds on volume. We saw flashes of that in the second half versus Beterbiev, and in the first half versus Beterbiev in the second fight. As good as Bivol's guard is, Benavidez is an expert at manipulating the guard and finding ways around it. I don't think this is a fight like Canelo where Bivol can just take a rest on the ropes and have a breather, because unlike Canelo, who's not a light heavyweight, Benavidez causes damage in those situations. We'd have to see the same thing we saw from Bivol in the second half versus Beterbiev in the second fight, where he was basically constantly flowing and looking for counters. I think both fighters would need to be on their absolute A-game to win this. I can see them bringing the best out of each other, and it'd be a shame if it doesn't happen. And that's going to take us to our final pick, Badu Jack. Badu Jack is going in the decent chance tier simply because he's a strong cruiserweight, and he's also a decently good counterpuncher. He is originally a middleweight moving up, but unlike Benavidez, as he's moved up, he's really filled out for those divisions. I do think he lost to Mikhailian and will lose again in the rematch, but he is a capable and strong enough cruiserweight to cause him issues. And anyway, that's going to do it for the video. Let me know who you agree with, let me know who you disagree with, like and subscribe, leave a comment. Goodbye.